We have a raven today from Lady Sarah the Unraveler. Hello, good sirs. Wishing all is well in the lands of teaching and fire. Put on your tinfoil hats and buckle up because we're going to Summerhall. Aegon the Unlikely ruled the Seven Kingdoms for 6 years, dedicated to the small folk due to his years as squire to Sir Duncan the Tall, and managed to lose favor with many of the highborn lords. His son broke marriage vows, causing even more strife and disloyalty amongst his court. By the time Summerhall comes around, he is consumed and obsessed with needing a dragon to solve his problems. Now, this doesn't really seem like the precocious little boy we met in the Mystery Night, but remember, he was always quick to want to use his "Do you know who my dad is" card. He is a Targaryen, so we can blame the kid. However, this aligns with the pattern to show his power for having the upper hand without thinking it through. Whitewall Castle being the exception. Here we have Bloodraven making the statement that Aegon is the dragon that hatched. Both Daemon and Darren tell Dunk of their vivid dreams involving him. We know that they mean metaphorically, but what if we take them literally? What if a great red dragon was born at Summerhall and a dragon hatched from an egg, meaning Aegon? Sir Duncan was said to have perished that day, but the hints that Coldhands drops makes me think otherwise. Like a proper Targaryen, he is becoming increasingly thirsty for dragons, commissioning tips to Ashai, acquiring pyromancers, etc. In both Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire, dragons come from Old Valyria, and apparently from the humans that lived there. Fire and Blood shows Princess Arya coming home on Balerion the Black Dread, suffering a horrible death. It is put on record that fireworms and other horrifying oddities were found writhing within her. She was also sizzling and smoking from the inside out. Dany brings her dragons to hatch by an odd combination of fire, blood, and death. She lost what she loved most for those dragons. Aegon's loved ones were present at Summerhall, including a very pregnant with Rhaegar Riella. 7 eggs were laid out. Sorcery and fire ensued. Summerhall was left to ruin, with no one left alive wanting to talk about it. The words doom and shadow come up a lot whenever the tragedy is discussed. Could the doom of Summerhall be a dragon, one bigger than the Black Dread himself? Could it be possible that Aegon became a literal dragon in the end? After all, in this masterpiece, that was season 8. It ends with Bran, Google mind searching for a dragon's whereabouts. Might even explain the need for so much strength in the north and why the whole Rhaegar is Mance theory.
Yeah, boy. Yeah. So, this is interesting, and here's something. So, Lady Sarah, first of all, thank you so much. Super awesome. Always happy to get her ravens because they are. They make you think, and they're very interesting. She also, in the same email/raven, I'll read some of these, put some quotes just to kind of back up some of this, so you guys can hear about some of these. The word choice that circulates around Summerhall. So here we go. Thoughts of Barristan Selmy. All 3 of the sons of the 5th Aegon had wed for love and defiance of their father's wishes, and because that unlucky monarch had followed his heart when he chose his queen, he allowed his sons to have their way, making bitter enemies when he might have made fast friends. Treason and turmoil followed as night follows day, ending at Summerhall in sorcery, fire, and grief. And I think that's one of the things is that we're talking about. There's fire, there's blood, but there's also sorcery. All of these things are things that when we hatch eggs with Dany, we used those things. We used blood magic, we used fire, and from that we had a literal hatching of eggs. And I think what Lady Sarah is saying is that all along, Bloodraven is even indicating that they're at White Walls during the Second Blackfire Rebellion, that we have an actual egg is hatching, right? He's becoming this dragon, and then later on, metaphorically, as she says, and then later on at Summerhall, we have either an attempt or he actually does, it works. Don't his brothers, kind of believe there's all this idea that they could drink wildfire and become a dragon of some kind, or it could open up
Aerion.
something.
Yeah. Aerion does that, Aerion Bright Flame.
Yeah, so when you think about that, I think that's interesting. So there's that element of sorcery, fire, and blood. And well, let's read just a little bit about, there's the page in A World of Ice and Fire where we get tidbits that the ink has spilled on the page, and George is not ready to kind of reveal what happens. The quote there is, "The blood of the dragon gathered in one, 7 eggs to honor the 7 gods." And I believe it's his 7th year reigning, or maybe it's not. But he's younger. Though the king's own septon had warned, ... pyromancers ... wildfire, more dots, flames grew out of control, ... towering, ... burned so hot that blank died, but for the valor of Lord come, and then it doesn't finish, right? So
Right.
there's one of our quotes. So I think this is interesting. I don't really know though, I think people have always believed that it is an attempt to, you had 7 eggs, and there is sort of, if you look at that, let me go back to that real quick. So the blood of the dragon gathered in one, what does that mean? And then the next thing is 7 eggs. Were they pulling, like is it an actual attempt to do some ceremony where, like, you have an individual turn himself into a dragon? I mean, like what? Like, I don't know if there's any.
Right.
That would be crazy. That would be kind of wild. I don't know if that's, or is it we're trying to use the other dragon eggs to one egg to make one big dragon, or what does it all mean? Are we trying to get all 7 to hatch? What's happening? And then she does kind of allude to the interesting connection between what we Coldhands, and Coldhands reference to the 3-eyed crow. He doesn't call him a 3-eyed crow. He calls him a friend.
A friend.
And, and that's something that we get a lot of hinting in the Dunk and Egg series, that Bloodraven is that friend. And so you start to think, well, maybe this is, who is Coldhands? And I think what she's getting at there is possibly that's Sir Dunk, right?
Right. Yeah, we've definitely gone down that rabbit hole. A lot of people. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely a prime candidate for it. So, I mean, I'm down. Let's dive down this, right? So
Sure.
we do see Bran searching for a dragon, right? Which at the end of season 8. But if that were to happen, say he does turn into a dragon, right? Who, and you're Duncan and you're still alive, who would you go to find him? I would go to the guy who I know is 1,000 eyes in one and knows like everything. I would go be like, hey, here's what happened, and we need to figure this out. Somebody else who we know is involved probably in sorcery. So whether it's that, or maybe it is a dragon did hatch and an egg flew off on it, I could totally see that, which would then put Dunk, as we know, Duncan goes north and we know they go to the wall at some point, but then also, it's believed he's, kissing somebody. He may be the grandfather, right, to Hodor. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and then we don't necessarily know. We don't necessarily know, obviously, what happens to him. It's believed he dies at Summerhall. I don't think so. I do think he goes on to do something else. So
here's something interesting. Like, you look at his age, right? So we're in Game of Thrones. We're around the year 300 AC,
right,
ish or whatever. So he would have been, let's see, 70. No, he would have been 67.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have been just 67 years old if he were kind of maybe in between 67, 70, whatever. But that's how old it looks like he would be, right? Am I wrong?
Now,
he was born in 233 AC.
Right.
Says that he dies in 259 AC at Summerhall, but he could be someone who, could potentially still alive. Yeah, like that's what's kind of wild about that. I mean, Bloodraven's much older. I mean, in his life is essentially lengthened because of his connection to the werewood, magic, sorcery, the whole thing, whatever it may be.
Right.
But,
well, if you were, so, because Coldhands, is, we don't really know how old he is, but he just certainly doesn't seem, I mean, he's kind of this thing, but it's kind of like, well, if you die at the time you die, and then you don't necessarily age after that. So, I mean, and they say he died long ago. So, I mean, if he went when Summerhall happened and then, dies and then becomes Coldhands, well, that would be right. I mean, that would probably be a decent, a decent time for that to happen.
Yeah, and the term or the phrase long ago. When is that, right? Is that just
Right. Because it's the
like,
children who say it, and it's like, is long ago for the children like 300 years, or
Right,
is or is it
Yeah.
like, or are they saying it because it's to them? So then that's, I think, the biggest thing to say that it's definitely not Benjen, because long ago would not be like, certainly not be months ago, or even possibly a year for the children.
Yeah, and this would only be even if you go from when Leaf is making that statement to Bran. Well, that would have been 40. Just over 40 years ago. So is 40 years
Right.
ago a long time? Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, it could be long ago. I guess if I'm thinking about it, 40 years, that's a long time ago.
Right.
But yeah, just it's all perspective, I guess, and depending on who you are making that statement and to whom you're making it to. So yeah. Now the other thing is, like, if he actually is, whether he's riding a dragon or becomes a dragon, whatever you want to say there. We were just talking about an ice dragon not too long ago, and so if you have this big red fire dragon, you know what I mean, and if something happens with Dany's dragons or whatever, and you've got some, the counter to ice dragon's what, 3 times as large as a regular dragon, and is it that they were prepping to make some massive fire dragon that could counter an ice dragon or something, and then it's just odd that we have Bloodraven where he's at with the children, and Coldhands and all of that up there in the beyond the wall. I mean, it's just that is also kind of stunning to think about. So I don't know. I think it would be really neat. I still think maybe he could be alive. He could be working on something. You have characters. There is a precedent for these characters who they go on quests and they do things and they're searching for information and they're gone for years and they get obsessed with a quest. I mean, you have Lord Hightower right now has been up in his high tower, which, by the way, I think sometimes we forget how big of a deal Hightower is. I mean, it's said that you could, from the top of that tower, you could see to the wall. Like you could, I mean, you can't, but I mean, it's like, well, you could with a certain glass candle, you could definitely see around. But it is super tall, and it's like this massively magical high tower. And you have somebody who's obsessed up there doing sorcery and stuff for years, hasn't been seen in years. So you have one of our Lannisters who goes on a quest to find the Valyrian sword. You have other people who leave and they go on grand quests to do whatever it might be, to win honor, glory, what have you. It's possible. I mean, just the fact that Bloodraven is still around and is a player up beyond the wall, there's a tie-in to history there. And him being as old and as ancient as he is, it would not surprise me. And the fact that Summerhall is such a mystery, and it is something that George will not touch. The only reason he wouldn't do that is because it matters and is significant to the main story. That is right. I mean, that is the only. Why? Why else not? Why would you not give it to us? It's too close. It's within 40 years leading up to this Song of Ice and Fire that takes place, and we have a great tragedy there. Rhaegar is born. The ghost of Highheart. It's, Dany's asking Sir Barristan, well, what happened to this individual, this woods witch who made this prophecy? And he doesn't really answer it, but again, it talks more about the doom and the gloom surrounding Summerhall. And then Arya comes across what we believe is that very same woods witch wanting a song about Jenny, Jenny of Oldstones. And it all that is where I think, we've always wondered when we watch the show, why didn't we get more about the Tower of Joy, about the tourney of Harrenhal, the Night of the Laughing Tree, all that kind of stuff? It's very likely that the show, where the show ends or where it kind of starts, there's so many missing pieces to it. There's so many storylines that happen in between there. And a lot of people have said that maybe where we see the show ending is not the end, and that George actually has plans to continue the series on, and a tie-in to Summerhall and the histories could extend
like Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah, that there could be that there's an extra kind of like, because you almost have like the Great War is ended, right? We go crown Aragorn king, and then we take 4 or 5 chapters and we march back to the Shire, and we still have to deal with the Shire, But I think even more so, George has kind of said, this is where I think I want to end it, it's not over. And I went back and I watched the HBO kind of documentary where D&D are talking about when they go to George, the ending was not, in their words, finished. It's not finished. And he may know where he wants characters to kind of relatively end up, but that's why I've said, and I've heard numerous people, we've gotten ravens about it, you have Winds of Winter coming out, and I'm telling you right now, it would not surprise me at all if we had maybe even 2 more books to come. Just that George is like, I don't know if he's ever going to get there or what's going to happen, but I think in his mind, this stretches much longer and further than he anticipated. It just keeps growing, and he wants to weave in some of this stuff from Summerhall, the Dunk and Egg series, just the fact that he's interested in that and that he's put time and effort into that while he is writing the main series shows you that it's connected, shows you that there are parallels to it, and he leaves it out of A World of Ice and Fire. So it is something we should look at more, almost more so than the Tower of Joy or the tourney at Harrenhal. Like, the events there are going to matter, I believe, in this series. I don't know how, what the deal is, but it's foreshadowing, there's prophecy, and somehow those characters still could be freaking alive and could come back as interesting players, like a resurgence of House Targaryen. So.